been able to upscale corruption. And I want to cite Kasarani Police Station, Madam Speaker. This is a police station where you will find tens of police officers along the road, Madam Speaker. And what do? They do not want to take the usual 50 or 10 or 100 Kenya shillings, Madam Speaker. So they will just order you to drive your vehicle into the police station where they will demand for a big amount of money as bribe, Madam Speaker, before you are released. And Madam Speaker, we must call this out. This is why we are where we are, because those that cannot afford these amounts of money, Madam Speaker, are always at a disadvantage. What does our judiciary do? In aiding, in solving or helping resolve these matters of corruption, Madam Speaker, the processes are lengthy. Somebody that has been accused, Madam Speaker, of corruption will take ages before their cases are heard and determined. And of course, they are going to buy their way. They are going to compromise even investigations, Madam Speaker, because even the kind of bail they get is very friendly. Somebody stealing, say, 100 million, given a bail, bail terms of about 2 million, Madam Speaker. So people are even more than happy to steal, pay bail, buy whoever that it is that you have to buy. And this is what has caused frustration in our people, Madam Speaker, leading to the events of the last 2 weeks. Madam Speaker, our laws are also weak. The day before yesterday, I think on Tuesday, we hosted the CS Health, Madam Speaker, the Committee of Health, where I'm a member. And, we wanted to know what NHIF is doing to see to it that there are no fraudulent claims, Madam Speaker. And where they are there, what they do in order for them to be able to recover the funds so lost. And Madam Speaker, we were very frustrated that the law does not allow NHIF, for example, even after they have discovered that a claim was fraudulent, to take such a fraudster to court, Madam Speaker. That they leave it to investigative agencies to look at it and take this matter to court. And I mean, that is frustrating. Because if I catch you stealing some bananas from my shamba, Madam Speaker, I should just go take you to the police, report you to the police station. Then you defend your case. The only thing I should be asked to do is the burden of proof that should be laid on me. But look at what NHIF is saying, that they cannot be able to take a fraudulent medical facility, a medical facility that is placing a fraudulent claim to court, Madam Speaker, that they have to rely on another institution, an investigative one. These are the things that have made Kenyans, that have frustrated Kenyans, and that is why, Madam Speaker, we find ourselves where we were. The other thing is waste of public funds. I've been asking myself, what happened to the Volkswagen Passat that former President Uhuru Kenyatta, when he was finance minister, introduced and decided that those were going to be the vehicles that were going to be used by public officers, Madam Speaker? How did we get back to V8, to Prados for public officers, Madam Speaker? We must go back to living by what we tell Kenyans. Let us see CSS in Volkswagen Passats, Madam Speaker, as was done that time, in order for us to save on public funds, Madam Speaker. The other day I was listening to CS Kuria, and he was saying that he was very, very, very frustrated and very concerned going to Mombasa, finding some staff, having traveled all the way from Nairobi to Mombasa to receive him, some stuff he did not need. Then when he asked why, he was told that somebody had not had an opportunity to get per diem for quite some time, and that is why they had been sent there. Madam Speaker, really? That all we care is that we see to it that some staffers get per diem, even when we do not need their services? These are things that we need to look into and, of course, make corrections where we need to make corrections, Madam Speaker. Now, many colleagues here have talked about chief administrative secretaries, Madam Speaker. Of course, I know that we don't have any one of them serving. But, Madam Speaker, there are rumors that there are plans to reinstate them. Madam Speaker, do we need CASs? What is it that they can do? What is it that we need them for? What can they do? What are they supposed to do that PSs cannot do, Madam Speaker? These are some of the things that we need to forget and forget completely. There should not even be anything like that because it has been determined as an illegal position, Madam Speaker, so that we save on public funds, Madam Speaker. Many people have mentioned the office of the First Lady, the office of the Second Lady, the office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary, and his spouse also, Madam Speaker. And I'm happy that His Excellency the President has pronounced himself on the closure of these offices, Madam Speaker. And I say this, knowing very well, because in Kiswahili they say, ya Mungu ni mengi, hayajulikani, knowing very well that I can also be president tomorrow, and my wife will be a First Lady. But I do not want my wife, even if I become president, to have an office funded by the Exchequer, Madam Speaker, because we need to save on expenditure, Madam Speaker, and I'm happy that the President has since dealt with that matter and pronounced himself, Madam Speaker. We may need to discuss on whether we need a Prime Cabinet Secretary and an office for that matter, Madam Speaker, for this particular position. Recently, after the floods, Madam Speaker, there were demolitions. But these demolitions were profiled. They only happened in low-income, in those areas where low-income earners live, Madam Speaker. And this was under the guise of clearing riparian land, Madam Speaker. But go to places like Lavington. You will even see some river courses, Madam Speaker, interfered with in order for somebody to create room to erect buildings along, in fact, next to the river, not just on riparian land, but next to the river. There was no demolition happening there, while we were demolishing settlements of those of the poor, the poorest of the poor, Madam Speaker. And this is what has caused dissatisfaction, Madam Speaker. The law must be seen to be applied equally, Madam Speaker, to those that have and those that do not have, Madam Speaker. I'm surprised how time moves, how fast time moves. So, Madam Speaker, this is something that has caused a lot of problems with our people. Madam Speaker, the CSs have abandoned the President. None of them, very few of them, are helping the President in this crisis, Madam Speaker. We do not know what is happening. I've been wondering as a person, is it because maybe they did not appreciate that time when they went for the cabinet meeting late and they were locked outside the gate? Madam Speaker, maybe that cost them some demotivation, that maybe demoralized them, and I would want to ask the President, because he must rein in these CSs, but maybe to do it in a way in future that does not see them being ridiculed or see them looking like school children who came late to school, Madam Speaker. So we do not know whether they have the right morale, but this should be looked into. Needless to say of how they pretend, big people cannot answer calls from us. Some of them do not even honor our committee meetings. Madam Speaker, these are things that we need to think about. Madam Speaker, PSs. Do we need all these PSs? Those are questions that we need to ask ourselves, Madam Speaker. Do we need all of them? What is it that they do that cannot be done without them? Madam Speaker, because my time is running out, we need to rethink about CDF, especially the bursaries given by members of the National Assembly. Somebody raised a very pertinent question. Why do we need to give members of the National Assembly money to give to parents to pay to public schools? Why don't we channel those funds directly to these public schools, Madam Speaker? Maybe we can talk about CDF as far as development is concerned. That is something we can discuss. But really, we give members of parliament money to go, give back to government? I mean, what logic is there, Madam Speaker? I mean, we can use what we are calling means testing. Let us use means testing in order for us to assess the needs of every other student so that we send these funds directly to their institutions of learning. We do not have, and we have done very well with the new funding model at the university level. We can cascade these downwards to secondary schools, Madam Speaker. We should not just do the things the way they have been done all this time. And finally, I dare to say, this nation could be under a curse. Madam Speaker, I say that, and this is somehow spiritual. Because, Madam Speaker, a father can curse a child. In the same breath, Madam Speaker, a president can curse a country. A mother can curse a child. What am I trying to say, Madam Speaker? Sometimes last year, Northlands, owned by the Kenyattas, was attacked. Sheep stolen. Bad things happened. The police never did anything. And that was associated with some leaders, Madam Speaker. Kenyatta may not have been a saint. President Kenyatta Jomo may not have been a saint. But, Madam Speaker, he was the first president of this country. Madam Speaker, he can cast this country from his grave. And this is something that we should take very seriously, Madam Speaker. There have been claims, Madam Speaker. We do not know how true they are.
Senator Newton, there were some ground rules laid before, and I think you wish to abide by them if you were well advised by the majority leader.
Madam Speaker, we said we are just reflecting, and if we want to know how we can heal this nation. So, Madam Speaker, I think these are things that we look into. When the former President Uhuru Kenyatta claims, rightly or wrongly, that he's not getting his benefits, Madam Speaker, that's another curse that can befall us. When we are told that security has been withdrawn from the First Lady, Madam Speaker, this can also cause a curse. So what do I suggest that we do, Madam Speaker? Let us...
Senator Newton, the guidance I have given you is we were to avoid names in the debates, so that you do not personalize.
Okay.
That was the ground rule that was given.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Then I'm well guided.
One minute for you to finish.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm suggesting, Madam Speaker, because I love this country, and I cry for this country, Madam Speaker. Can we approach the people that I have mentioned? Can we apologize to them? Can we seek that they lift any curse that they may be having against this nation, Madam Speaker? Because we must speak, Madam Speaker. Let us approach these people. Tell them if we wronged you, we are sorry. If you have spelled any curse on this nation, we persuade you, we beseech you, please lift any such curse that may have been here, because we want our nation to heal, Madam Speaker, and we must do everything, whatever we do, whoever we talk to, but our nation must heal. Madam Speaker, I support, and thank you for even the extension of time. Thank you very much.
Senator Catherine Muma, she's not here. Senator Asige.
Thank you. Thank you, Speaker. As I rise to support this motion, I also want to stand on the submission that I made last week, because everything that I said, I meant. And I also wish to appreciate our substantive speaker.
Can you just consult in low tones? Majority Leader, please guide the team to consult in low tones. Proceed, Senator Asige.
Speaker, I must begin by appreciating our substantive speaker for steering us so well through this very sensitive subject matter. He has done a very good job, and we thank him. The gig is up, Speaker. The emperor has no clothes. Speaker, I wish to lay the foundation of my contribution in the famous play titled King Lear by William Shakespeare. Widely regarded as Shakespeare's finest work, King Lear is an allegory that illustrates a sharp fall from grace from a king who is drunk with pride, with ego, the desperate need for control and praise, who makes a series of mistakes by listening to his immoral eldest two daughters and bad advisors, who exist only to praise him for their own personal gain. Though caring for him greatly and always wanting the best for him, Speaker, King Lear chooses to reject his youngest daughter, Cordelia, because she refuses to flatter or feed his ego like the others, by telling him the truth, even at the risk of her losing her inheritance. Shakespeare's motif revolves around King Lear's fall into error and Machiavellian ways, which we see when he arrogantly declares that he has ultimate power and can choose to ignore his subjects whenever he is pleased with them. His inability to see the truth leads him to lose power, wealth, his senses, his truest daughter Cordelia, and ultimately his own life. Speaker, the entire internet was screaming during Sunday night's interview with the president. Don't mean to anthropomorphize, but TV screens across the country would have turned themselves off themselves if they could, after what is said to have been a train wreck of a conversation from start to finish that left the emperor naked. I must acknowledge, however, the decision by the president to have a 2-hour unscripted sit-down, because seldom do African heads of state risk putting themselves in unpredictable, uncontrolled environments like that. With our majority leader setting the tone through this motion, let the Senate be your Cordelia, Mr. President. You are a leader in the service industry, and I was told just last night that the two most vital pillars in the service industry are perception and experience. And for such a delicate subject matter, you at the very least need a stellar crisis communications team, because your words kept fueling the fire last week. I also want to remind the president that it's not about him. It's not personal. We didn't name it Kenya Kwanza. That wasn't us. Kenya Kwanza. Not Kwanza the noun, Speaker, but Kwanza the adjective. And instead of putting Kenya first, your presidency has put Machiavellianism first, like King Lear, when all that us young people wanted was for you to put Kenya first. Like a performance review of sorts, Speaker, we expected that on his third attempt to address us on Sunday night, he would come with details, with data, definitives, strategies, but it was still so vague, so non-committal, so uninformed. It felt dismissive and disconnected. Speaker, the president went on national television without a clue of what has been happening. He believes he governs. Was the deputy president right in his address last week as well, that his boss may not know all that is going on in the country? How many people are in custody, he was asked. He replied, I have a ballpark figure from the police that they have enough people. What do you say to the youth who say yours is not a listening government, he was asked. He said, I have 4 things: housing jobs, digital jobs, export of labor, manufacturing. You believed barely 1.5 years ago that you could run the country on 2.9 trillion. In a few months, you went to Parliament and requested 3.6 trillion. This year, you went to Parliament and requested 4.2 trillion. And what do they see in return? They see extravagance in government, he was told. He replied, let me tell you the following. Today, universities were almost closed because of debts of 60 billion shillings. I have enhanced their budget by 40 billion shillings because education, to me, is the greatest equalizer. Speaker, this went on and on and on. Tone deaf and not answering what Kenyans really wanted to hear from the president. Not only were shots fired at innocent young protesters last week, Speaker, but it seems in this interview we also saw shots fired at his cabinet, his deputy president, and even the communications team caught astray. So what are some solutions? Speaker, In response to austerity measures as directed by this motion, the President has on record made pronouncements of what he plans to do. Young people do not want more dialogue or multi-sectoral groups before he actions what he has already committed to do. In his Wednesday, 26th of June press conference, the President committed to do the following. 1, reduce expenditure, starting with the Executive Office of the President and extending it to the entire executive arm of government. 2, operational expenditure in the presidency be reduced to remove all allocations for the confidential vote, reduce travel budgets, hospitality, and purchase all motor vehicles and renovations, as well as other expenditures. Number 3, Parliament, the judiciary, and county governments working with the National Treasury also undertake budget cuts. This clearly shows, Speaker, that the President knows exactly what he needs to do and precisely what he needs to focus on. Get rid of corruption, get rid of wastage, get rid of breaching court orders, get rid of misdirective and duplicative pots of money like CDF, which completely usurp the true function of a legislator. Speaker, members of Parliament are supposed to legislate and ministries are supposed to implement. No parliamentarian should have a CDF allocation because our role is simple: to represent, to oversight, and legislate. We have no business building markets and roads and hospitals. Get rid of CDF that bastardizes the role of a member of Parliament. We also want a repeal of other unconstitutional legislations since this government came into power. And we want leaders to be leaders, Speaker, not leaders to be dealers. However, to achieve all this, we also want to hear definitives and strategies, not broad, pie-in-the-sky pronouncements. By now, Speaker, we should already have heard how much he will reduce expenditure in his office. How much will you cut from your travel budget, your hospitality budget, from the purchasing of motor vehicles and renovations? Speaker, the President has economic advisors who work for him round the clock and should have crunched preliminary numbers for us to see by now. On Sunday, the 30th of June, he was asked on national TV again if he'll reduce his ministers and ministries, to which he replied, and I quote, "That is an area that we will have to look into because that is a reality that we will face." It clearly shows that the President needs to do. Speaker, for my second proposal, let's go to Article 152(1) of our Constitution. That the Cabinet consists of A, the President, B, the Deputy President, C, the Attorney General, D, not fewer than 14 and not more than 22 Cabinet Secretaries. This means, Speaker, that our Constitution provides that the President can cut the number of ministries to 14 from the current 21, saving the country billions of shillings. The Constitution goes further to say in Article 152(5) that the President, A, may reassign a Cabinet Secretary, B, may dismiss a Cabinet Secretary, and C, shall dismiss a Cabinet Secretary if required to do so by a resolution. Sorry, not sorry, Mr. President, but wake up your Minister of Youth Affairs, because the youth are telling you that they are desperately underserved. Wake up your Minister for Interior, because too many poorly trained, trigger-happy police officers exist under his watch. Wake up your Minister for Labour, because young people are protesting in the streets due to a lack of equal opportunities. Wake up your Minister for Roads, because we're seeing the worst levels of carnage and needless deaths of young people than in any 10-year preceding his. Wake up your Minister for Trade and Industries, because from small innovators to entrepreneurs to industries, the ecosystem she is leading has become terribly unforgiving. If you already know what needs to be done, and the Constitution gives you the power to take action, Mr. President, Cabinet Secretaries must be sacked. My third proposal, in reaction to point number 1 in this motion, revolves around exercise of legislative powers. Speaker, Why is it that the finance bill never makes it its way to the Senate for consideration? Our Constitution does not bar this upper house from jointly considering legislation, especially those with as much gravitas as a finance bill. To illustrate this, I want to go to Article 109(5) that says, a bill may be introduced by any member or committee of the relevant House of Parliament, but a money bill may only be introduced in National Assembly in accordance with Article 114. It simply says, Speaker, that a money bill may be introduced only in the National Assembly, but nowhere does it say that a money bill cannot also be considered in the Senate. Our Constitution only bars this House from introducing money bills, not from considering them. This must be corrected to avoid future constitutional misinterpretations that lead us to continue allowing the National Assembly to monopolize such crucial functions. I'm just reading the law. And while we're at it, Majority Leader, the entire country knows that our committees here are chaired and vice-chaired by your side, the government. That doesn't give balance. That doesn't give an opportunity for real unbiased and impartial looks at bills and proposals and legislation in this House. If you hold the chairmanship and also the vice chairmanship in all committees, how are we telling the rest of the country that we are transparent and we're going to move forward in a new way? That also needs to change. Speaker, life is in the power of the tongue, because if we get this mandate, we cannot afford to mess around and continue to play politricks. My fourth proposal focuses on the presidential assent and of the Finance Bill 2024. And for that, let's go to Article 115 of the Constitution. 1. Within 14 days after receipt of the bill, the President shall A. assent to the bill, or B. refer the bill back to Parliament for reconsideration by Parliament, noting any reservations that the President has concerning the bill. Not National Assembly, Speaker. It says that it will go back to Parliament to be considered by Parliament. And the last time I checked the definition of Parliament, both houses were included. What about the conversation on salaries, Speaker? Well, I want to say the following. The Salaries and Remuneration Commission really did not read the room. Today, in order to pay all public servants, figures show that we are spending 1.1 trillion shillings, which is 46% of our budget. I want to be frank. I propose our current salaries for those at the national level be cut by 50% and our allowances be reviewed downwards. That's right. I want us to put our money where our mouth is. We shouldn't pussyfoot around that, Madam Speaker. Because let's be honest, today's salary and allowances are the only reason why people kill, steal, and destroy anything in their way in order to work in the national government. And that needs to end. Speaker, there used to be a time not long ago when being a public servant was very unattractive. I'm sure Senator Halwale will remember that if you have a good degree, a good studies and accreditation behind you, you would rather go into the private sector because it was much more lucrative than the public sector. But now that has gone upside down, Speaker. We also heard the President tell us all that we are set to lose by having rejected the finance bill on Sunday. He said, and I quote, "So what is the alternative? Help me with that, Linus, because there are only two things we can do. Either you raise money from taxes or you borrow, period. There is no magic here," he said. Well, Mr. President, you're right, and there is no panacea, but all you had to do was ask, because the Finance Act of 2023 provides clear examples to learn from. For one, we witnessed a reduced consumption of petroleum products, a slowdown in construction due to high cost of materials, and a significant overall increase in construction costs, largely attributed to the imposition of the export investment levy, and on raw materials, that is, Speaker. Notably, imports of clinker, crucial for cement production, dropped by 77.5%. Also, remember that in the first half of the 2023-24...
Asige, I want to just inform you have 4 more minutes left.
Also, remember that in the first half of the 2023 fiscal year, the KRA missed its revenue target by a substantial 186 billion Kenya shillings, which underscores the point that overly ambitious tax measures do not always lead to increased tax collections. These figures are solid data we can trust, Speaker. Why impose more taxes, levies, and charges when we haven't fully recovered from the negative effects of the previous legislation? Many of businesses were forced to close, and some relocated to neighboring countries with more favorable tax conditions. What's the real solution, Speaker? What are the Gen Zs and the many Kenyans protesting for? We are exhausted just seeing the president on these trips every single week, as if he's Beyonce on a world tour. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, that is. The president is not on a world tour. He should stay in the country and do his job like the rest of us do in this country. Yes, he may have had many plans, but Mr. President, exporting our brightest minds to work abroad is not the solution. This brain drain is crippling us and cannot be quantified at all. Did you know that these countries who call for Kenyan workers, do you know what they ask for when they are calling for us? They want under 45s only, highly skilled, well-educated, in good health even, and they must undergo rigorous vetting because they have a particular criteria of people they're looking for. That means that we are removing our best minds, our best workers, our best laborers, and shipping them off to Australia, Germany, England. But do they ever bring the people here, Speaker? They do not. In my conclusion, as I close, I would like to speak directly to young people. Everything was impossible until somebody found a way to make it possible, and today that was you. You have been steadfast in demanding that this government stop and listen to you, and before this moment, everyone thought it was impossible, and now, though I remain a bit skeptical of the presidency to some degree, I still stand 10 toes down in believing that Kenya will never be the same again because of you, young people. I also want to be real with you. We must stop glorifying money, praising those with flashy cars, big houses, expensive holidays, eccentric lifestyles, and filtered lives. It's us that keep applauding that behavior. We follow those accounts. We like and repost their displays of opulence every day, and this exacerbates the problem of these people wanting to keep up their public images. But not that all that glitters is gold. Why don't we go back to exalting excellence, character, conscientiousness, and all that is good and all that endures? There is a reason why Paul says the love of money is the root of all evil. We really must change. Speaker, let me land by circling back to King Lear by William Shakespeare. Anna Camerali writes that the tragedy of King Lear's lack of understanding of the consequences of his demands and actions is often observed to be like that of a spoiled child. But it has also been noted that his behavior is equally likely to be seen in parents who have never adjusted to their children having grown up. Speaker, Kenya's democracy has grown up. It has matured and it's maturing into a faceless, fearless, tribeless legion of...
Time is up. Half a minute, you finish that sentence. Give a 1 minute, Secretariat.
Thank you, Speaker. I was saying, Kenya's democracy has grown up. It has it's maturing into a faceless, fearless, and tribeless legion of the majority of our population, who have a good constitution, but unfortunately in the wrong hands. Speaker, Kenya, I stand by them in this House. I speak for them in this House. And when they name the 25th of June, 2024, Z-Day, they will know that you did that. I thank you.
Senator Catherine Moma.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to speak to this very important motion, the State of the Nation. Madam Speaker, because we have some time, allow me to begin with sending my sincere condolences to all families that were affected by the loss of their loved ones. Allow me to name, because I'll use my time to name the young people who lost their lives. Madam Speaker, we lost the life of Brian Lemayan Kasaine from Narok, Austin Makoha Nakuru, Mike Kihunga Nakuru, Kelvin Madanga Nakuru, Chris Gitonga Nanyuki, Kennedy Onyango, whose mother's image has not left my mind, from Rongai. We lost Rex Masai from Machakos, Matthew Njoroge, Kevin Mawasi, Bisley Kogi, David Chege, Erickson Kialo Mutisia, Ibrahim Kamau Anjiru, Kennedy Odhiambo Maina, Wilson Sitati, Kennedy Njeru, Eric Kayoni Kieni, Eric Karatu, Brian Kimathi, Kariton Mwangi, Ernest Kanyi, Caroline Shiramba from Kakamega, Brayo from Kisumu, Mbithi Alaya Scott from Kisumu, Emmanuel Giggs Tata from Mombasa, Joshua Ombati from Mombasa, Clinton Mwavali Kapsabet, Kevin Odhiambo Siaya, Brian Rongo, Bernard Mungai Ndwati, and we have another nearly 10 whose bodies are lying in the mortuary unidentified. Madam Speaker, I believe we have many more whose names had not reached the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. I felt it's important to name them, Madam Speaker, because what has happened in this country is a revolution for the third liberation of this country, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Gen Zs are simply trying to get back this country on track. Madam Speaker, I wish people would not speak. People are consulting so loudly that I cannot even hear. Listen to what I'm doing. Madam Speaker, the Gen Zs are telling us a very simple thing, that in 2010, we put in place a constitution to guide how this country should be governed. But this country is not being governed in that manner. And they are telling us that there is a very important provision in the Constitution that we have chosen as a country, particularly the leadership, to ignore. They are bringing us back to the implementation of Article 10 of the Constitution. Madam Speaker, they are bringing back the conscience of this nation. They are telling us that we must go back to what Article 10 says about respect for the rule of law, respect for human rights, governance in a manner that respects equity, equality, and the most important one, that we must now start governing this country applying the principles of transparency and accountability. And Madam Speaker, because a lot has been said, I want us to immediately move on how best we can actually speak to the issue of transparency and accountability. The finance bill was a trigger, and the President has returned the finance bill to the people of Kenya. Madam Speaker, what we are forgetting, that the finance bill is usually passed to finance an appropriation act that had already been assented to. It is usually passed to speak to budget items that were in the budget policy statement. Madam Speaker, the mistake number one that we do in this country, we do not publicly discuss the budget items and the appropriations that we are put in the Appropriations Act. And the Budget Committee and the National Assembly have failed us because they did not scrutinize budget policy statement. They did not scrutinize the appropriations bill properly to be able to tell the president some of these things you have put here cannot fly. Madam Speaker, part of those items include the following: confidential budget in DP's office, 800 million. Confidential budget in the president's, in the State House, 1.4 billion. 863 million for hospitality in the Deputy President's office. 400 million for dealing with the drugs, and NACADA will be given some more money. 320 million for innovation in the Deputy President's office. 1.5 billion for renovation of state lodges. Meantime, we have 600 billion only for education. 126 billion only for health. Madam Speaker, I can go on. This is a public document. Please go and look at it. Madam Speaker, what the Gen Zs were telling the president is we must go back to the drawing board. We must reorganize the budget items. We must revisit the Appropriations Act, which you passed. The president assented to the Appropriations Act, Bill number 34, and today we have a circular from the Treasury guiding all accounting officers to rework their budget so that we can raise the 26 billion that we will not be able to raise in taxes, and in order to rework the budget. Madam Speaker, this is my view, that it is the same cabinet secretary who put this bullshit in this budget. So he cannot be the one to be trusted to do this.
Senator Catherine Muma, that is not
I withdraw.
language.
I withdraw.
Withdraw the term bullshit.
Madam Speaker, I think it was agreed we speak with emotion. And I think those items...
Senator Catherine,
those,
not with unparliamentary
I withdraw.
language.
I withdraw. I withdraw. Madam Speaker, what I have just read, and I could read more, is despicable as budget items for this country. And that we are trusting the same person who put it and took it to Parliament to be the one to reorganize is lying to Gen Zs. Madam Speaker, what Gen Zs were telling the president, we need a public participation and a participatory approach to reorganize our budget for the financial year 2024-2025 in order to together come up with a saving. I believe if we relook at the budgets at all levels, we will probably save more than the 300 and whatever billion that they wanted to actually raise from the taxes. So the big job that the National Assembly and the Senate should be doing is to do the big job of allowing our experts, whether in civil society, among the Gen Zs, to openly and transparently audit the budget items one by one for the executive, for Parliament, for the judiciary and put money where it is required. So where we need essential services, we must put money where we need essential services. Where we are wasting money, we must remove that money, because what are we doing? We are working on budgeting for corruption. So number one, Madam Speaker, the President said that he will go and borrow for the deficit. I am recommending that we don't allow one more shilling to be borrowed until we put in place a system that can ensure accountability, transparency with debt. So, Madam Speaker, I'm suggesting not borrowing 1 shilling for the 2024-2025 budget. Madam Speaker, number 2, I am recommending that we rationalize the expenditure. We need to find out how much does hospitality for 863 million look like in one office. We need to clearly agree that is budgeted corruption. It must be moved aside. We need to start asking, what is this confidential budget? What does it normally do? And when we are doing the audit, I would want to find out, in the previous year, how much was there for hospitality? In the previous year, how much was there for confidential? What did it do? Madam Speaker, we need to start doing that. As we are reducing expenditure, one of the other things we need to do is to find out, how do we identify duplicated jobs? I have just given one example. We have NACADA dealing with drugs, but you give the Deputy President 400 million to deal with drugs. We have county governments doing county roads, but you have CDF being given money to do county roads. We have national government doing bursaries, but you have the President with bursaries. You have governors giving bursaries, and yet education is a national budget. We will save a lot by looking at duplicated items to save that money and send it to the essential services. As we are doing so, Madam Speaker, we must not reduce the budget to social spending that keeps the dignity of the human beings in this country. Our development strategy must be people-centered. We must provide education. We can only keep increasing our budget in education. We must provide better health. We must keep increasing the budgets in health. We cannot say we are not now going to pay the interns. We are not going to pay the doctors. And yet we have millions for mandazis. It is not acceptable, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we also need to look at the issue of political employments. And I'm suggesting Public Service Commission must be summoned to the Senate to tell us what structures it has set up of a parallel public service that is not provided for in the Constitution or in the law. How many advisors do we have in the presidency? How many do we have around the cabinet secretaries? How many, even the county public service board should tell us how many advisors do we have in counties? That is a parallel, silent public service. As they are telling us, the SRC must join them to tell us how they have cleared payments of salaries to unstatutory and unconstitutional offices. Who is going to be held accountable for that? So those two bodies must tell us what we need to do. We also need to find out, why are employment laws not being followed? Why are constitutional commissions which are supposed to be independent not doing this? Why are TSC letters being peddled by politicians? Why is TSC issuing employment letters? TSC has been practicing has been in the practice of employing those who've been waiting before the ones who are qualified recently. Can we have a public audit to find out how many people were politically employed because they know politicians, and those who are waiting and are sons and daughters of poor people were not able to get those issues. Madam Speaker, we need to also audit debt. And I'll go quick. We need to audit our debts and ensure to find out documents and all agreements relating to that need to be made available to Parliament so that Parliament can actually audit this. We also need to audit the debt expenditure. So we borrowed for this. Have we been doing this? And I'm suggesting that we get a special team to be able to do this. I think the Auditor General needs to be facilitated. Parliamentary PBO office needs to be revamped to help us to do debt auditing, Madam Speaker. If we do this and we do it transparently so that our audit is made public, it's not an audit to be hidden, then the Kenyan people will be able to know what we are doing. Madam Speaker, we must audit all funds. We have so many funds. The Youth Fund, the Women Fund, the CDF. How are they being implemented? We need to audit them. I think that the thinking behind funds is good and is noble, but are they being used for purposes that they were supposed to? We need to do an audit. Those ones that are being used for purposes that they should be used, be retained, and the others that are not being used for the purposes that they should actually be looked at. Madam Speaker, World Bank report in 2020 reported that we have dead infrastructure. They said 50% of CDF projects were dead because when an MP comes, they don't want to touch what the other one did. That is public money. We need to find out whether we need to put in place better structures for the management of CDF. Madam Speaker, then we come to Bunge. Bunge must do its bit like every other. The National Assembly, together with the Senate, have passed laws that are unconstitutional. I want us to do an audit of the cost that unconstitutional laws being challenged in court have cost the taxpayer because we did not do our job as Bunges. I want to find out how many laws we have passed. For instance, 30 minutes to pass a law to enable the KDF to be set against our kids. No public participation, no adequate time for members of Parliament to discuss that. Madam Speaker, as Bunge, we must take responsibility for passing laws that have violated the Constitution, for passing laws that have circumvented the Constitution. Madam Speaker, I want to speak to the people of Kenya as well. As we are speaking and everybody is taking responsibility, I would want our people to also take responsibility. When we queue to receive 200 shillings from politicians in funerals and elsewhere, I want us to start asking ourselves, where do you think this person has got money from? He does not have even one industry in that county of yours. He does not have a factory where he's employing anybody. He moves around in very, very affluent vehicles, dressed up well, and just stands and dishes money, and you take that money. Ask yourself, who in their right mind would take monies that they have worked hard in a business to build a business and start dishing it out? What are we doing? That is money that should have been providing your schools that is being dished out to you. That is money that should have been making it possible for you to get access to health that is being dished out to you. Madam Speaker, we need to speak to our people to say, do not encourage thieves and do not elect thieves. Let us do what is right and let us ensure that this country moves forward. So it is a moment of reckoning, not just for members of Parliament, not just for the President, not just for the CSS, even for the church leaders and other leaders. Where do you think somebody, Catherine Muma, who does not have any factory anywhere, all of a sudden has 20 million to give you? Why don't you ask yourself, na hii 20 million aliitoa wapi? I think as a country, the Gen Zs are calling all of us to recheck our conscience, are calling all of us.
Senator Catherine, your time is up. 1 minute only to finish the sentence. Just 1 minute.
I will finalize. Madam Speaker, I think I've spoken to every sector of society, and all I'm saying, all of us need to introspect and do the right thing for this nation. Thank you.
Senator Karungo Dhangwa.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'm really happy also to weigh in into this motion and support this motion. Madam Speaker, on 26th of June, I had written to your office requesting us to do the same, to have a motion to discuss what we are discussing today. I'm happy, though I did not get a reply, I'm happy it has come through the channels that it has come, for us to discuss this issue. Madam Speaker, this is the time for the people of Kenya to know that Senate is the upper house. It is what was meant to be by the drafters of the Constitution, Madam Speaker, because they wanted this house to be more an appeal chamber, to be a house that will bring appeal mechanism where Kenyans who are not happy with what is happening with the executive, with the other assemblies or with the National Assembly will always have a channel to come and weigh in and give their contribution, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, if the finance bill was to come to the Senate, what happened to this country could not have happened. Those maandamano that were here could not have happened, Madam Speaker, because here